Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra.
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people
Associated with the creation
Or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked,
and sometimes what didn't,
you will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts
And inspire you to do even greater things.
Before we jump into today's conversation, a special thanks to PM Power Consulting for encouraging and supporting this show right from the start. With over 1,000 person-years of collective experience, PM Power has helped many organizations, teams, and individuals chart out their own journeys of excellence and make progress. Thank you, PM Power. Now, let's move to today's episode. My guest today are a cultural engineer-anthropologist, Dr. Allen Batteau, and design anthropologist, Dr. Christine Z. Miller. They recently co-authored a book called Tools, Totems, and Totalities, The Modern Construction of Hegemonic Technology. This is a very different conversation from the normal ones that we've been having on the show. Christine Miller is a professor at the Savannah College of Art and Design, and Allen, a retired professor from Wayne State University. In this conversation, they share details of their interdisciplinary backgrounds, their collaborative book project, and the implications of technology on society. And they discuss the concept of sociotechnical systems, the brittleness of technology, as well as the ethical responsibilities of designers and software developers. Then they touch upon the potential impact of AI and user-centered versus social-centered design, the role of speculative design in fostering innovation, and hope for the future of humanity. Listen on. So welcome to the Software People Stories, Christine and Allen. I really look forward to different perspectives and your experience and your studies over the years. If we start with a quick self-introduction, then we'll take it from there.
All right. Thank you. All right. My name is Christine Miller. I am many things, but for the purpose of this interview, I am a professor at the Savannah College of Art and Design in Savannah, Georgia. I teach in a graduate program called Design Management, which is about the orchestration of design assets to achieve organizational objectives and aims. It's also strategic design, what you would call strategic design. And Allen was my dissertation chair, the chair of my dissertation committee, when I completed my doctorate at Wayne State University in Detroit many years ago, like 2008. It was a while back. So we've been in contact, and I went the direction. I'm also an interdisciplinary Ph.D. business, organization, and anthropology. After my graduation, I went to SCAD as a faculty member. So I've been teaching designers, working with designers for many years, for 5 years up at in an IIT in Chicago, in the business school there, in the business school at Wayne State. So I've had a very interdisciplinary background, teaching mostly, but also a lot of work in the private sector, nonprofits, defense industry. So very varied background, a varied background. And yeah, okay. Allen contacted me to co-author this book, and I agreed, and here we are.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Allen?
Yeah. Okay, I am retired, but I continue to write. And my latest book, as you're aware, is this book with Chris. Wayne State was my second academic career. I got my Ph.D. from the University of Chicago, and I was a professor at Michigan State for a number of years. And I left the academic world to work, first of all, in the political world, and then I went to work in the software industry. I will not bore you with the details, except that I was an anthropologist in the software industry, so I had a mixed perspective. And from the software, I For the software world, I learned about this professor at Wayne State, Marietta, who has started this new subdiscipline, business anthropology.
Okay.
And that's what brought me to Wayne State. Wayne State is unique in having kind of leadership in business anthropology. And the connection between technology and business is one that I've worked on ever since.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think you would be the first anthropologist on the show. And I guess as an industry, software is fairly young as a study for an anthropologist, but still, I think there is a lot that we can learn from other disciplines. Yeah. So what was the trigger for this book?
Okay, the trigger was that technology is far more complex than simply we realize. And technology is also fairly new. The word technology only came about in the last 300 years or so. But humans have been using tools for thousands of years. But tools united with the written authority of the written word, logos, is a very recent thing. And we explored what technology as this complex source of authority meant for humanity. Our title, Tools, Totems, and Totalities. Tools, that's obvious. As I said, humans have been using tools for millions of years. Totems are signifiers of identity. Humans use tools to signify their identity, especially their occupational identity. But totalities, this is a new thing. Totalities meaning a world-defining order. Okay. Technology defines our world in ways that it did not define it 300 years ago.
Interesting. Yeah. Is there anything you want to add, Chrissy?
Sure. Yeah. Building on what Allen said, one of my big interests, and Allen introduced me to this concept of sociotechnical systems. This is really how technology becomes hegemonic. It's these systems are, and when I'm teaching design students, I can never just let this go, of course, because this iPhone, actually it has a cover, but this iPhone just not just an object. This is part of a system, and the technology is deeply embedded and layered in this thing. It creates a network embedded in our lives, exactly. And it creates a network of human and non-human actors, right, that all have to work together to make this thing do what it does. Right.
Yeah.
So sociotech systems is very important for designers. They need to understand that what they're designing, whether it's a tangible or an intangible thing, is part of a system. It's not isolated. It's not a thing. It's not just an object, so to speak.
Yeah, wonderful.
So Allen and I have come together with this understanding of what's happening in the world today.
So taking up on this, the classification of hegemonic technology, how do you think software development practices either contribute to or support the characteristics of hegemonic technology? Probably many times unintentionally or unknowingly.
From a knowingly perspective, much of the technology that we use today, and let's talk about software, right, drives a need to continue using it. It drives a kind of a stickiness that you can't just abandon it. And we know that because to participate in contemporary life, you have to have these certain technologies. And all these technologies have these multiple parts, the hardware, the software, the firmware, right? But we are now like embedded in this. And there's really no choice. If you want to participate in contemporary life, you have to have these things. It is embedded in our lives. And an example being when I was in Chicago at IIT, a lot of walking around the city. And at that time, someone had come up with, a software engineer, had come up with the idea for people who were soliciting on the street, asking for money, had come up with a software program where people didn't have to give them coin or paper. They could use Venmo or something like a Venmo to give these people money through these digital systems. It's just constantly grabbing whatever it can to pull and make these things tighter. But as Allen points out in the book, these systems, although they're difficult to abandon and to get out of, they are very brittle. And I'll let Allen take that one.
I will pick up on that because one thing I'm working on right now is the whole issue of AI. Excuse me. Now, when I say AI, you're thinking artificial intelligence, but also AI is artificial ignorance, because AI is human thought that can be stuffed into a machine. And the human mind, and when I talk about the human mind, I don't just mean my brain, society's brain, is the most inquisitive and flexible thing on the planet. And to kind of stuff that into a machine, you have to narrow your vision. That's why I say it's artificial ignorance. And the more we rely on AI, then the more shackled we are. AI does not set us free. AI limits us.
Okay.
And that is what the research shows, because there's tons of research going on in AI right now, generative AI. And I've recently been involved in an experiment where we have looked at people's perceptions of AI while they're using it. And the experiment involved like people using it in a singular, just one-on-one with AI, groups of 2 and groups of 4. And I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but one of the things that other research is showing now is that as AI becomes more embedded in everyday life, we see it's gone from this kind of democratized, everybody can use it, and you can become like not an expert, but you can become pretty knowledgeable about something as a baseline, right? You can learn about, say, service design at a baseline all of a sudden in a matter of minutes, really. But what happens over time is that then everybody is average at that level, right? And because there's nothing new coming in, pretty soon you get this self-referencing situation where the whole thing begins to collapse. It's all self-referencing. So to Allen's point, the creativity is not there. And we know that if we step back and look at the big picture, research, the innovation is less than it was a decade ago. And yeah, this is cause for concern, big concern. And de-skilling. If you can just become average in a couple minutes, but you don't have background that, underpins what you know, then what?
Yeah, very powerful point. And in your book, you also talk about convivial technology. Maybe for the benefit of our listeners, you can briefly explain what it is. But the question is, do you also have any suggestions for practical design principles or approaches that can be used by software people to move away from creating hegemonic systems to building convivial solutions?
Well, okay. So I don't have, and I don't know if Allen can respond to this better than I can. At my fingertips, I do not have a set of principles but I would say that it's value driven. And not assuming, not going into the situation, assuming that you have a directive and you're going to follow it. But what are the values that you're going into this development with? What are the underlying values, right? Is it a concern for humanity? Is it a concern for the planet, for all species on the planet? And of course, profit. The thing is that we have to generate profit somehow to keep our projects going. But having that first concern being for humanity and the planet, and then profit, right? This is what people are searching for right now. What are alternatives to the system that we're in now? I'll call it late stage capitalism. How can we avoid the cliff that everybody knows is there? There is in design we have lots of subfields in design and theoretical approaches in design. And one of them that I'm particularly attracted to is called transition design. And transition design looks over the long arc of history and tries to understand, how did we get here? How did we get here? Before we go on to something else, understand how did we get here? So, yeah.
Let me pick up on one or two things that Chris said. Humans are social animals. Okay. When we are stuck in our homes, we are not social. This whole concept of convivial design is an important part of it. In conviviality, one thing I discovered in my research is that the whole act of eating together, consuming food together, drinking together is really an important part of how humans develop social ties. And to the extent that we are pulled away from that with our smartphones, we lose some of our humanity.
So is this somewhat similar or an extension to what otherwise is labeled as user-centered design?
And my comment was that it goes beyond that. It goes beyond user-centeredness, which, by the way, design has not really accomplished that because they look at it in a very narrow context. Alan, did you want to say something there?
Let me probably pick up on what Chris said, that user-centered is focused very much on the individual. And the whole concept of a sociotechnical system is focused not on the individual, but on the society. You might say social-centered design.
And also user-centeredness is, in the design world, is typically thought of as something that is like immediate. I'm using this particular software program and I want to be able to use it easily, right? I want it to be seamless with other things that I need to do. But it's for me individually right now using this thing. It's not considering all the externalities that this device, this system, this network is creating. It doesn't consider that at all. Many people are moving away in the field of design and otherwise, I believe, but specifically in design, are really moving away from this idea of user-centeredness because it's so narrowly focused on just the present moment.
Yeah, that's very interesting. You also mentioned a little earlier about this being part of a larger system of people and software and other things together. To be part of this or to create something that is going to be more impactful, instead of user-centric, like you said, people-centric or community-centric. Does the perspective in software development change, or what should one be looking at?
Yes, short answer is yes. Software development usually follows a set of design criteria. It needs to do this, it needs to do this, it needs to do this, it needs to do this. And so how do we make all these things happen? Which one is going to be prioritized in the development of the software? But where do those design criteria come from? Where are they coming from? And again, what's the underlying objective and the values that are driving the software? So instead of just having the task to develop this one thing, like where what's the overall objective here? And is this something, what are the consequences of this thing? So again, it's taking the software development out of just the immediate task of developing the software that's going to accomplish this thing and thinking about it from a higher level. What's the objective here? What are we trying to accomplish? And what are the consequences of that? Consequences are very much a part of the innovation process. Innovation isn't just this thing that we do, we develop something and then we throw it over the wall. After it goes out into the wild and people are using it, there are consequences. Some of those consequences are intended and some of them are unintentional. And all of them have effects.
See, we also talk about software development being more of a team sport. It's not one equal. It's more like a team sport.
Yes.
An individual who creates it. So
Yes.
from your, let's say, anthropological studies, maybe in other industries or other areas, from how to structure teams, how to make the communication among team members more effective, are there any thoughts that you can share?
I think the most important thing is to realize a larger perspective, not a narrow perspective, but reaching out to different walks of life, different communities, and really understanding how this affects them, not just how it affects my immediate task, but how it affects the larger world.
And that's a consequence of education, the way education has gone over the last decades, where we've become so skill focused, right? It's just education is very narrow. People want the skills that they need to get a job, and then that's it, as if that job is going to be around forever. It's not. They're lucky if they can be in that job for a year or two anymore. And yeah, lots going on there. But education itself has become more and more narrow. We know from the anthropological departments, anthropology departments in many universities have been shrunk to almost nothing as the budget requirements. We really need to focus on just task learning and turning out people that are career ready, right? But that just dismisses all the richness of what we know now to be liberal arts education, liberal education. But that's not the demand.
Yeah.
Allen.
A larger perspective or larger context for this is the whole idea of a university. A university is not a trade school. And a university is a community of scholars. And to the extent that we narrow our perspective, just focusing on skills rather than the larger perspective of human history, we are narrowing our options.
Yeah. Yeah, Christine, you mentioned something about focusing on activities or tasks. I think most, at least some of these, that the user experience designers say that they want to create these habit-forming products, or getting someone hooked, getting someone addicted, or the attention economy, the influencers, this whole bunch of things. Doesn't it stop someone from thinking in a broader sense, looking at probably productivity as something that come and get some task done? So the engagement metrics override the larger the value creation.
Very much. Absolutely. As you say. Yeah. That becomes everything. And in the process of that being everything, what are we losing? We're deleting the social. We're deleting the social. Life becomes less rich, less creative, less imagination. We don't even think about options. It's just this. And then we try to grab a couple hours of whatever, and then that I can't do it again. Yeah, I've seen this very often. Yeah.
You mentioned the whole issue of productivity. We talk about this in the book, that supposedly the rationale for technology is to improve productivity. But I'll quote a Nobel laureate, Robert Sowell, who said, "You see, the computer everywhere except in the productivity statistics, that kind of technology does not necessarily, often it does, of course, but not inevitably improve productivity. It does many other things.
So, from your studies, have you found any good examples in other industries that could be useful for the software people?
Okay, I was going to just mention the internet. The internet really is very new. I won't get into a lot of detail about the history of the internet, except to note that the graphical web browser, the ability to use the internet not just as text but as images, is an extremely new thing. And really that kind of took off as a world-changing event. World-changing event, really about 30 years ago or so. And we really didn't fully understand how this has changed our world. We know that it's done good things, it's done bad things, and often it's created more social isolation. If everybody is on his smartphone, what's the point?
Yeah. So,
To
great.
your question about industries. Okay. Your question about industries other than software development that have been looking in other directions. I would say many industries and many occupations. Where I teach, we have a particular department, a special department that works with industries all over and private sector, public sector, government, and they are looking for creative ideas, ways getting out of the kind of enmeshed thinking that we see so often, and trying to find other ways of looking at things. And in anthropology, we have certainly developed this idea of field research, which design has picked up a lot, right? So we have user research, design research, user experience, all the kinds of research that designers do. And many industries come to our school, other schools, so that they can experience this and help them think in a bigger, broader way to get a larger perspective. I would say many, right? But the profit motive that drives many companies makes that it's too expensive, but they can't not do it. Otherwise, they're a commodity.
So, talking of profit motive, maybe a slippery slope here on ethics or the ethical considerations, particularly when you have access to platforms, when technology is pervasive, what you can do. So, what do you think should be some of the ethical responsibilities or code of conduct, if you may, for software engineers and designers? Because they have the power to manipulate user attention. And with all the fake news that's running around and what's being generated today.
My answer would be that you should broaden your perspective. Anthropology is a field science. It's not a laboratory science. It's kind of field sciences. We get out of the laboratory, we get out of the library, we get out into the larger world. And we need to understand, we need to have this perspective of the larger world, how the larger world is affected by our technology.
Yeah, I would agree. And I teach a course called Ethics, Sustainability, and Business Innovation. And we look at ethics, we look at sustainability, how they come together, and we look at how these two ideas can drive business innovation, particularly business model innovation. And one of the things that we start out with is the concept around the ethical perspective called the acting person, right? So instead of being a third person looking in at situations and making some sort of critical judgment about was this handled in an ethical way or what are the ethical issues, it's about the first person. It's about your own character and how does this impact you? How is this work, the situation that you're in? What is this doing to your character? And over time, how does this accumulate? And what are you going to look back on? And how are you going to feel and think about your contributions? So yeah, that acting person perspective, I think, is really critical to real understanding ethics from a first person acting person perspective.
Okay. We also see that the pace at which technology has been evolving, or at least the complexities in creating solutions or the interplay of different solutions, sometimes we feel that it probably makes the whole thing a little unstable. You can't really catch up. You have to keep running to just you are. So what would be the role of designers in having maybe a little more robust environment or doing things in a more deliberate manner?
That is a really, okay, good question. Again, I think it comes back to there's this urgency that's created, the urgency to create the next thing or fix the thing that is now not working. But we are so often just ready to move on to the next thing with no concern for maintaining what's already there. So maintenance gets a real bad rap. And again, I think that the idea of the urgency, I don't know, that's such a big topic, but we generate that, but we never take the time to dig in to understand, okay, what is driving this sense of urgency? What is it that we're trying to respond to?
Yeah, for instance, yeah, go ahead.
Can we use critical thinking to evaluate whether this is something we should do or not? What's driving it?
Yeah, for instance, when there's a new model of the phone launched, people lining up overnight or saying that I must have this, even though probably the older version was just fine.
Yes, the FOMO. Yeah, exactly. Right. Because people's identity, again, to this point we've been making about sociotechnical systems and technology being embedded in people's lives, it says a lot about who you are. If you have this newest, latest thing, or if you're doing this thing, or you're not doing this thing. And I'm sure we've all felt it. I have an iPhone 11, and now I'm feeling like, oh, God, should I get a bigger, or should I get the newer one? What's it going to get me besides a cost, a really big cost? There's a lot of things that do people have the ability, again, this gets back to this idea of hegemony. Are people able to say, no, I don't want to buy into this. I'm not a big user of social media. I use LinkedIn. I have a Facebook account. I have an Instagram account, but I don't use them. I'm more interested in things like Blue Sky. I want to know what are the alternatives to these things which are harvesting data and basically providing surveillance. Yeah. Can we be curious about that? And can we give people a sense of curiosity that this isn't the given. We're creating the next thing. We don't have to accept the given.
In your book, you also talk about the world becoming more brittle. Can you elaborate on that?
I think I don't remember his discipline, but Charles Perrault developed this concept of normal accidents, that a system is complex and tightly coupled. Accidents are inevitable. Okay. And so if you have inevitable accidents, is it really stupid? An accident or just stupid? And this whole idea of a brittle society, kind of one waiting for a normal accident to happen, is a key thing, because we are making the world more brittle with all this technology. We think about an old-fashioned dial phone and think about your cell phone. You're connected all over, and it's complex. So complex and tightly coupled is an accident waiting to happen.
Yeah. I've come across some
very.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, for example, I think probably all of us have been through periods of time where, due to extreme weather, last summer, we were out, we didn't have electricity for, almost a week.
Right.
And watching, and quarter had already started.
Okay.
So we have many international students. They had no idea. They were new to the country. They'd been here a couple weeks, and
Right.
here they are, like no electricity. We're in the South. It's very hot. No way to some of their friends in other parts of the city had electricity. So they're all like tramping over there and camping out on the floor. This is just an example of the brittleness of technological systems, specifically electricity. And the power companies are madly trying to prepare for the next one because we know the next one is coming and it could be worse.
Yeah.
So how do we, so we have to have new technology to then try to overcome the brittleness of the previous system.
Yeah. So I've been also following some of the thoughts on these complex adaptive systems, the tightly coupled ones. And there we talk also about when you want to be adaptive, you need to be sensing and responding to whatever is happening around. So you also talk about, I think, speculative design, right?
Yes.
Is that
Yes.
something that will help us move from the me generation to something with a larger social purpose?
Oh, definitely. I think it will. The idea of a speculative design is the use of the imagination in order to look out into the world and put together various pieces to imagine something that doesn't exist, building on maybe what does exist, maybe building on what exists. But how might we, and companies use this, they're beginning to use this because unless you have the ability to use your imagination, you're only going to recreate and reenact what you're doing currently. You have to be able to think out of what could be. So yeah,
This is why I'll say that AI is artificial ignorance, because we're just limiting our imagination to what a machine can process. Whereas, as Spinoza says, nothing is freer than the human imagination. And we are moving away from that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is one of the real things that I appreciate and the joys of working with designers, young designers. And one of the classes that I teach is about developing what they call an innovation mindset. But I don't take that as innovation with a small I. I take that as innovation that humans have always been involved with on a daily level, on a daily basis, as well as for bigger projects. But being able to, what are the things that allow you to do that? So it's the development of the individual and a value system, and then being able to out in the world based on that value system. So going back to the acting person ethics idea, how do we train people to do that? Designers to do that.
Yeah. Okay, let me just pick up for a second on that whole idea of the innovation mindset. This is part of being a human being. Animals are not innovative in the ways that humans are. And to the extent that we limit our perspective for just what can be done, we're getting away from our humanity.
Okay. One maybe this question that I had was, given all the work that you've done, what is your projection or imagination, if you were to call that, for the impact of technology and tools on the future of humanity? It's a very large question, but your perspective.
That is the large question. And I would have to say I'm not optimistic. It's quite plausible that we will destroy our planet using technology. This is what global warming is all about. But we can write a whole on that.
I don't know that I want to. I'm more hopeful. again, my affinity with design. Designers are always hopeful, they're dreamers, and the best designers are able to access imagination, and that's critical for any human being, but specifically for designers. And I think the hope is, it's got to be there. It's got to be there. It springs eternal, as we've heard, but also without hope, there's nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing if there's no hope. And so how do we generate hope? How do we keep the younger generation hopeful? By showing them their power, by trying to open their perspective to seeing, okay, who are the drivers? Who's driving this? Where is the power? How do you claim your own power? There's got to be hope.
Yeah.
And I think it's
Absolutely.
certainly a challenge to keep that up.
That's a wonderful concluding thought.
Yeah, I would agree with Chris, and also say that my hope is that the systems will self-adjust to make sure that it doesn't get destroyed.
Yes, complex adaptive systems.
Yeah,
We'll
yes.
see the writing on the wall. Yeah, we will or we won't, but I'm hopeful.
Okay. On that positive note, thanks a lot, Christine and Alan, for sharing your experience
Thank
and
you.
all the research that you have done. And there are a lot of triggers and new things to think about for me, and I'm sure for all our listeners as well. Yeah. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.